Now this is 11th remark, and we are now quite close to the end of these remarks. And this 11th and the next remark both concern ethical issues in connection with culture and culture business interdependence. Well, this 11th remark concerns the issue of the topic of the role of culture in business, especially the role of culture in European business, in European ethics, and of course, consequently, or not, in European business ethics. And this is a old paper by Debeljak and myself, perhaps our first paper, in fact, the role of culture in European business ethics and business ethics, in business ethics and corporate social responsibility book. This is the paper. Okay, now this remark would be quite close, few minutes only. What is important, I will skip all this stockholder debate, and I will just mention few quite important elements of specific features of European business, of European ethics, and of European business ethics. Well, concerning business ethics, European business ethics and CSR, I'm reading it, are aimed at broader context and environment of business, and that means legal, political, social, and cultural environment. That in actual practice means that certain care is regularly directed toward continuous contact and negotiations with different stakeholders, which results in balanced decisions of management and actions accordingly, meaning in accordance with these decisions. This phenomenon is a consequence of three factors. First is European legal and jurisprudential heritage, which is quite different from, for instance, from that in the United States. Apropos this difference, it must be said that it is grounded in specific nature of US common law that produces winners and losers, while European civil law produces, civic in fact, law produces balanced arrangements and agreements. Second factor is certain political culture of constant dialogue negotiations as precondition of decision-making process, or reaching a decision and action in accordance with the decision. On this matter, it should be mentioned that European countries are politically determined by strong representative and proportional democracy, in which there is a constant dialogue, negotiations, and coalitions making and also breaking. This system influences economic policy and practice that comes down to the fact that European, as said by Van Luyck, that the fact that European employers and employees meet each other at the negotiation table more often than in court, in the street, on the barricades. Finally, third factor is in fact small but important difference between market economies in, again, the same analogy as dissimilarity will be used in the European Union and in the United States. Regarding this difference, we can only mention that in the US there is a competitive managerial capitalism at work. In UK there is so-called personal capitalism, and in Europe, for example, in Germany, cooperative managerial capitalism, as explained by Chandler Jr., or social market economy by Van Luyck, 1998. There are, however, other relevant differences between so-called Germanic cluster, Latin European cluster, that show differences in cultures, ethics, business, and consequently in business ethics and corporate social responsibility. Both clusters have similar values of communitarianism, universalism, achievement, but there are differences. For example, ascription is more important than achievement in Latin European cluster, especially in business relationships, according to Hodges and Luton's 2001. These differences are surely enough to explain in part, at least in part, differences between business policies, practices, sets of values, and consequently of business ethics and CSR. Moreover, these differences are influenced by many factors, and among these, an ethical factor is dominant. It affects legal system, economic system, but also business system as explicated. Now, it is not surprising at all that an ethical approaches like ethics of communicative action, ethics of responsibility, ethics of discourse, social ethics, utilitarian even ethics, ethics of care, and virtue ethics in some way are determined by European cultures, and as such they determine business ethics and business. They determine European business ethics in a way that there is a presence of much more contextual approach, because it discusses ethical aspects of privatization, rights of employees, morality of investment policies, and of market economy, essentially. This is, however, rooted in more elementary distinction. In European Union, ethics is not much confined to responsibility of the individual in different situations, but comprises as well a collective responsibility for shaping social market economy, as it is described concerning German cluster. Okay, social elements of ethics in general and also in applied ethics is very important besides individual element. Okay. How really this cultural element influences business element? Well, it influences in two ways. The basic idea is that there is indirect influence, in which culture generally, as a feature of society, of a group, influences each and every person, and also legal persons, so consequently also companies. But on the other hand, this is some kind of indirect influence, because it goes through various channels in society and culture. And there is also the kind of direct influence. And direct influence that local companies within particular cultures, particular societies, are in fact companies that are shaped in terms of their professionalism, in terms of their core business, and consequently in terms of moral values and ethical considerations manifested by core business, manifested by professionalism, etc. In a way that this direct influence, in a way that they shape so-called corporate culture. So corporate culture is in fact manifestation of culture. It is not something like corporate culture that creates culture or determines culture of a society. No, it's the other way around. Okay, so this is it. I will not talk about these elements of ethics in Europe, but I will just finish with three features of European business ethics. So anybody trying to do business with Europeans should, at least in terms of Latin cluster or German cluster, should take these three seriously into account, especially if one comes from quite a different culture, with different cultural features, with different business practices, and consequently with different business ethics practices, of course. Now, the first feature is business ethics in European way consequentialist or even pragmatic ethics, in a sense that the result of utilitarian cost-benefit calculus is checked by additional criteria like cultural demands, political interests, social responsibility. We can see all of this is various ideas made by various ethicists in Europe, like Otto Appel or Hans-Jürgen Habermas, Karl Otto Appel, etc. Even in some quite strange European philosophers such as Ludwig Wittgenstein. Okay, and their systems of ethics, like an ethics of communication or ethics of communicative action, etc. This can be really on some important points compared, and similarities could be found between these ethics and, for instance, ethics in terms in which was explained or described by John Dewey, for instance, his pragmatic idea of ethics, which is not utilitarian at all. Second factor is European, in his books Ethics and Human Nature and Conduct. Second feature is European business ethics are oriented toward responsibility, community, and public good, especially in terms of ethics of responsibility. And third feature, European business ethics are shaped by the broader context, legal, cultural, social, political, etc., of ethics of care, ethics of discourse, and political ethics as well. So this is it, and this should be taken into account. Now, there are two practical advices based on this basic idea of dependence of business on culture. And if business depends on culture, then culture should be taken into account by business, not vice versa. First is theoretical recommendation. I will read it again. Theoretical recommendation could be the following. Strong cultural influence on business, directly, indirectly, okay, doesn't make European business ethics itself anyhow morally better than business ethics and business in any other part of the world. This Eurocentrism is awful idea. Decisive is that European heritage and many forms of life must be counted in if a complete understanding of European business ethics, corporate social responsibility, and business should be understood properly. And business is what we are after for, and this is not obvious from the perspective on the same issue from the point of view of ethics of business alone, and the part of their interdependence is culture. Practical recommendation, on the other hand, perhaps much more interesting, would be the following. In doing business in Europe, people are actually determined by demands for profitability, legality, morality, and preservation of cultural identity as well. Moreover, we have certain obligations towards preserving, or even that we ought to preserve, this interdependence and balance between business ethics and culture, not just for the sake of profitability, cultural identity, or morality, or this or that, but for the sake of preserving certain set of European lifestyles, this variety of European lifestyles that are costly after all. Variety is costly. Which is nevertheless a part of something that we can call European identities regarding business, moral/cultural values and practices. Customary, daily, or remarkable on the other hand. It doesn't matter. So this is general idea of this influence, as this should be taken into account, because CSR and CSI, so we moved on, in these 10 remarks, we moved from CSI towards authentic CSR. Now, authentic CSR isn't authentic if it isn't rooted in culture. So a business should understand the culture in which it operates. However, there are opposite cases, and the opposite cases of influence of business on culture is the topic of, and is it in fact CSR or CSI, is the topic of the next remark. Thank you.